This is just too brilliant to me. I love it. I love it. Hello,
Can
hello,
we begin
hello,
ahead?
hello, hello, everyone. Hello, 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 everyone. We are live. All right.
Hello.
While I set everything up, do all the sharing and all of that, Bina just going to say hello.
Hello and welcome everyone. For those of you who are going to join now, welcome, and just a little bit about this story and the lives that the Sil is going to read, a very profound story, which is about so many things in our life. It is about having and building and creating trust, capital T trust, and self-trust. Just by listening to this story, you will see that how much more you can extract from the life in general and from every aspect of our life, and especially right now in this life. Before just going live, Silver saying that, okay, how miraculous it is that I'm just on the other side of the world for him, like we are 12 hours apart, and still we are here together, communicating and sharing, and of course, so many other people also. This is the magic. This is the miracle of this new world and new technology, and the power of dream and the power of ideas. Because somewhere, someone was just dreaming about this thing and might not be assuming, might not be really thinking for the first time that it could be possible. But look, we are having this. We are experiencing this power, this miracle, which was just an idea before. And this is the power of the intent also, that whatever seems impossible can be possible soon. And this
Yes.
is what we are experiencing, and this is what this whole story is about. If
Yeah.
even not long ago, if we just look at our lives just 10 years ago, many things in our life, many situations, many people, many perspectives, most of our awareness might be impossible for us. But right now we are having this. So this is the power of the intent and the dreaming. So now we are
Yeah.
going to have this story, and Sil is going to share that how things which seems impossible can be possible. So, Sil,
Yes.
are you ready?
Yes, yes. All right. I have one more thing to share too. Just want to add the post to the guide real quick, and that's very fast. So
Yes.
just well, on that note, let me just make that comment there that
Yes,
the
please.
in group these I save all the lives and the ones we do in the week as well to the guide tab in group. Now that guide tab isn't available on the phone, I noticed. But it is on the computer. But if you're on the phone, just go to the feature tab. There might be some in between, but you'll find all the replays there in the feature tab. No problem. Also, just a note here that on Sundays, doing at this time on Sundays, going over the reading and focusing more on reading the story with comments and discussion afterward, because the chapters aren't that long usually, and if they are, we'll break them up, right? There are some long chapters, but typically
Yes.
it's a reading of 10-15 minutes, maybe a little longer depending, but then we get into the discussion afterwards. So the Sunday format a little different to the rest of the week format. And then on the weekdays, we go into it with the capital R reading, right? And where we might, like we did last week, we did one quote and we did the whole time on just that one quote. But this is the magic of it, because of course moreness leads to moreness. And this is
Yes.
essential to understand and remember, that moreness leads to moreness. And here we are, it's not necessarily that we're discussing the story. Yes, the story starts it, but those deep discussions are about what comes up, what it connects to, what it relates to, and particularly where it's pertinent and relevant to you inside, right? What comes up in you. And this is what we discuss. So we might end up talking about whatever's going on in your life, but it's always connected and there's always a moreness. So before we get going, hello, hello, Norma. Norma says hello to both of us. Yes,
Oh,
thank you.
yes.
This is wonderful. And for whatever reason, I'm only seeing this. I got to change that. Why am I just seeing Bina? Anyway, that's all good. Hello, Janet. Hello, Janet. Hello, Janet. Ah, so pleased to hear. And hello, Elizabeth. Elizabeth entrusted. Yes. You're entrusted with all that moreness and wonderfulness, Elizabeth. Yes. So I'm very thrilled to hear. Very thrilled to hear. Um, 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 Bina, do me a favor, please, and tag Ramsey, just so that he's
Yes,
aware, right?
yes,
Ramsey also
yes.
in other side of the world, more or less, not quite as other side. All right. So while we give space for people to join, because it always takes a few minutes, it's just the nature of the lives that you can't start right away. Well, you could, I guess, but then people are going to be missing the. Oh, there we go. I got to put my video on. No wonder I was just seeing Bina. Sorry. Yeah. Well, if you don't have your video on, Zoom will only show the person whose video is on. It doesn't show you when you speak, so it doesn't switch. I just had it off while I was doing all the other things. Anyhow, so just to recap real quick for those watching the replay, we've been going over the prologue, which is quite an extensive prologue. And the prologue is about how everything started. So from where we're going to start today, we go back in time many centuries to the time of Earth, this time now, right? Our time now. And where this idea of seeding the stars and sending humanity out fresh, and where our descendants are going to be the best representation of us possible. And the idea is for them to go into a new galaxy and start humanity there, but to avoid all the problems that humanity had in learning, right? So that they start off not as just, well, where we are and they're just continuing whatever's going on now. No, they're starting afresh to avoid all the problems and silliness and foolishness. So this is where this concept of the noble ideal comes from, to say we want the absolute best that's going out there, right? So our descendants can truly represent the best of us, our children and our children's children's children, right? Our descendants. So this is a very powerful, powerful idea and a concept. And of course, this starts off as a big campaign, as a promotional event, etc. Um, and so, brilliant. Hello, Girish. Very pleased to hear. Wonderful, Norma. Thank you for mentioning that there. Wonderful, wonderful. Girish makes very interesting posts in group sometimes and or regularly, I should say. And so, very thrilled that you're here, Girish. Very, very happy. This is great. Anyway, so on this idea, this promotional campaign, which starts off as an idea, as a possibility, as Bina mentioned, of making the impossible possible. This is the start of it, right? We're going to go out into the galaxy, and they start off this as treating it as if it's a real project and sponsoring and rewarding any excellence that furthers this ideal, this dream, this goal of going out and seeding the stars. And it's called seeding the dream. Anyway, so as it goes along, it turns out that they discover somebody in the corporation. That's all the new Nobility Corporation, which is setting this all up. Somebody discovers the great gravity engines, and it's now actually the impossible has become possible. Off they go out into the stars. But of course, there's a bit more, as there always is in such stories, right? In the stories that I share, there's always more. There's always layers to it. So this moreness is that, well, in all this new advances and the impossible becoming possible, also, focus on new ideologies, new philosophies, new technology. It's like very real. All superstition kind of fell away because people are thinking things through to the end, etc. But it sort of got overlooked a little bit that those old myths may have some foundation in reality. And it turns out they actually are gods that were in all of those myths, right? Not all around the world, right? They're actually real. However, it turns out also that these gods were just knuckleheads way back when, and they were just terrible humans that just had powers, right? So then the gods themselves, they start to get a bit of a clue and they start to wake up, and over the centuries, they start to mature and evolve. Hello, Jessica. I'm glad you're here. Hello, Jessica. Wonderful. So now we
Well,
have this extra factor involved of the gods, and the gods are, their mandate is to assist or partake or shepherd, or however you want to call it, manage maybe the evolution of humanity. But there's a wrinkle. They've got to do it kind of very sparingly, only meddling when they absolutely have to, because they also have to take the universe into account. And well, they got into lots of trouble when they were just running wild and going crazy, right? So the universe really smacked them about because of it. So we have gods that are paying attention, but much like we would pay attention to ourselves or our children, well, more to our children, I suppose, where you've got to step in sometimes and do something, but you've also basically got to let them raise themselves and learn as much as they can, right? Because you have to learn by yourself, otherwise it's not really real. So sharing, not telling, all of that kind of thing. Anyhow, so the gods, it turns out there's a god gene. This was all revealed in the prologue. There's a god gene in humanity that had fallen dormant, and they decide to reactivate this, right? In the cedars, not necessarily on Earth, but we don't know about that yet. Maybe it's left a little bit open there. Maybe it's on Earth too. We don't know. Anyway, this idea of the God gene, and it comes into the story, as you'll see a little later too. But anyway, so they activate this. Now the story, where I want to just read the last part of the prologue, because as we come to that, it sets the stage for what's to come, right? So this is brilliant. This is brilliant. Come on, Ramsey, don't be late. I know Jessica sure said that, she thought it was in 2 hours time. So she's making every effort to come here. So brilliant. So please, if anybody else, you see anybody else saying hello or loving or liking or anything, let me know. I do like to welcome and greet people, because now you're part of the conversation, Girish. You see, because Norma mentioned you there. So thank you, Norma. Thank you, Norma. That was very thoughtful. Brilliant, brilliant. All right, let's go to where we left off in the prologue, right at the very end. Again, I'm not looking to recap the whole prologue. I already did, but I want to just do that last part because it sets the stage for what's to come. It really sets the stage to what's to come. So I'm glad you're here, Jessica, and that we going. The Sundays are of course a little different. That we do the reading, and then we do the discussion very, very afterwards. So it's kind of good that you have your camera off. Otherwise, you're going to sit there looking pretty all the time. So anyway, we'll leave that to Peter. She'll get
Absolutely,
happy.
no worries.
But again, of course, Bina, also feel free to turn off your camera. It shifts like I was saying earlier. When you guys all have your cameras off, then only my video shows, and it helps for the screen
Okay.
share. But
Okay. So you better ask openly. Okay. So now we are going to do that. Person
well,
is
I don't
asking.
want to. I don't want to say directly. I'm being diplomatic, capital D diplomacy. So yeah.
Sorry, it fails, but okay, we are going to do this
All
anyway.
right. Well, I tried. I tried. I tried.
No, it
All
is
right.
also because I also want to just focus on completely on
Yes.
the story.
Correct.
On this
Correct.
also.
Correct. So we're going to share. So I'm going to start. I'm just going to go right into it, and I'm going to start with the end of the prologue, and then jump right away to chapter 1. I'm very excited for chapter 1. Really, this is a deep chapter in my heart, by the way, and it lives in there. It has a special place. It has a very special place, because I wrote the chapter 1 before the prologue, many years before, actually. A big gap between the two, so they're very different. So all right, here we go. What follows, the Biella series, is the story of your children, our children, out there among the stars. Those versions of ourselves we hope they will be, training to be gods, as we all are. We are still in it, of course, back here on old Earth, still in the training. We can't give up. This manuscript somehow has come back to us from the future to give us ideas. The ideal community is comprised of those who possess independence of being, from practicalities of the new nobility. Anu, who'd called the current council of the gods, addressed her focus at Mercury and Jesus. We've been following your grand plan for many centuries, and now we've come to a culmination of sorts. Yes? Affirming nods from the two planets. In particular, we're here to observe an individual, a potential, a maybe, one who might herself be culmination. Let's see where this goes, if it can. The New Nobles, Module 1, Session 2. That's how it fits into the greater scheme of the Moreness-Project. Just one word, Chapter 1. One concept to rule them all, one concept to find them, one concept to bring them all, and in the unawareness, find them. From Tales, Myths, and Fables of the New Nobility. Brilliant. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Good timing. Good timing. Wonderful, sir. Good timing. Good timing. Good timing. I want to read this quote again. I love this quote. Wonderful, wonderful. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Hello, sir. Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. I'm just starting. You came at the perfect timing. So I'm going to just reread the quote and then we'll start. One concept to rule them all. One concept to find them. One concept to bring them all. And in the unawareness, bind them. From Tales, Myths, and Fables of the New Nobility. I am here, thought Biella, at the school, the school of nobility, not for, she reminded herself. I'm here to engage in noble living, to learn nobleness, to acquire new ways of living, new ways of being. The school of new nobility, nothing at all to do with heredity or historic nobility. Those were long dead. The new nobility was something else entirely. The school of nobility, a school like no other. An entire planet, the school. An entire culture and society of school. A school with no classrooms, no teachers, no lectures, yet a phenomenal school. Profound, effective, continuous. A school of joy, fun, excitement, and mystery. A school where learning was play. She'd been accepted from among so many all across the galaxy. A marvel to her. She'd been at the school a number of years, but still the wonder of it infused her. Ari Berry Biella, her friends just called her Biella, strolled past groves and gardens of every conceivable size, shape, hue, and texture. The more of nature inextricably linked to the new nobility. Lithe strides conveyed Biella through gardens representing grace, courtesy, goodness, honor, virtue, integrity, communion, and more. Anyone could join the new nobility. No set definition constituted the new nobility. One just knew. No status to it either. Harder to understand. A long time had been needed to establish this statuslessness. Many had faded from the school when they realized their ambitions of personal attention would not be met. Now it was simply common knowledge that the new nobility and ego, vanity, self-importance, or fame didn't go together. The new nobility were there to serve. They were there to be experienced. They were there to be. They added to the world around them without trying to, simply through being, in that unique way. But Biella's thoughts were elsewhere. Meeting her picnicking friends plus a few random joiners she didn't know in the middle of a large expanse of lawn, Biella asked, if you were to wake up on a strange world with your memory gone, only able to remember one word, one concept, what would it be? Ah, Now, yeah, I am going to pause. I am going to pause because I want to ask all of you this question again. Brilliant. Here. Brilliant, 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 brilliant. Wonderful. All right. So let's go back. Let's go back to this question. Yes. If you were to wake up on a strange world with your memory gone, only able to remember one word, one concept, what would it be? What's your response to Biella's question? What's your response to Biella's question? Sure, Bina. Now, oh, before you say, don't want to, spoilers here. Uh, see why I put in the next the next part there. So skip your response because you guys know the story already, right? But also provide responses you would imagine might be common or possible responses. Yes. So share what you might think this might be a typical or a common response, if anything comes up into you, without giving the spoiler, right? Hello, sir. Hello, sir.
Good morning.
Good
Do
morning.
you want me to answer? Because I don't think I have it. I don't know if it's typical or common or not.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
can give there.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Go ahead.
If I woke up in a strange place and I could only remember one thing, I would have to ask, what's my intent?
Interesting. See, yeah.
It might not be where you're going, but that's what
Yeah.
that's what came to mind.
Yeah. Okay. All right, Linda. Sorry. All right. I'll just have to get back to you. That the link for this event is also the same as the replay link, but I'll send it to you. Janet says love. All right. Anybody else? I'm not Norma. I would imagine, Norma, that you might agree with Janet, but who knows? I never know. I never know with Norma. You come up with wonderful things, Norma, and you wrote such a wonderful poem in response to Bina's poem. And maybe you haven't seen it yet. Did you see? Norma's comment, by the way, Bina? I remade it
Yes,
into a poem.
yes,
Just formatted it.
it was so
I,
huge. It was so huge for me. Anyway, this
yes,
the response, because of course I know that, so that's why I'm
yes.
not going to. But the first thing I still remember when I first time heard this, and I was like, okay, yes, what this could be. So it was like, okay, yeah, awareness. Yes, okay, self trust. Okay, capital T trust.
Wow. Wow. Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
Wow.
these
Wow.
type of
Wow.
things.
Now, of course, we want to, as part of, typically we want to give multiple responses, not just one. But today we'll just kind of stick with one, just to spread it around a little bit. So come on, Elizabeth. Come on, Ramsey. Come on, Norma. Girish, if you're still there, share. Let's hear from you. Yeah, I am keen to hear a bit more, and because it is possible. Oh, Connie can't make it. That's all right, Connie. That's all right. Yes, it is wonderful, Connie. It is wonderful. I always hope. I'm always optimistic. Elizabeth says impeccability. All righty then. That's a good one. That's a good guess. All right, wonderful. Good. Oh, good. Norma says she's watching us both on the computer and on the mobile. She doesn't have sound on the computer, so she uses the phone for the mobile for the sound, and then she sees us big on the big screen on the computer. Brilliant, Norma. All right. So impeccability, we have love, we have self-trust, and sure. Sorry, remind me again.
Intent.
Intent. Ooh, intent. Very cool. All right, we're going to skip what the greater importance and significance of Biella's question is by implication here. We'll do that tomorrow when we go over in detail, because I don't want to lose the connection to the story. So Biella's asking the group, right? And she says here to her friends, on this, look at this picture though. Isn't that just too gorgeous? So this is, I tried to, if you look at the behind the text too, you'll see I'm trying to represent Nobelia, right? So they over here somewhere, I don't know where they are, but they're picnicking here somewhere in this great expanse, right? Well, it's common. We'll get to this a little bit later. This is just how things are in Nobelia. It's a very outdoor society. It's an oral society. So Biella asked, if you were to wake up on
What
a
Ramsey?
strange, what does Ramsey say? You reminded me of watching the stocks in Wall Street. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. That's very, that's, wow, wow. That's most intriguing. Oh, I think because of the multi, the screen doing that
Exactly,
infinity.
exactly. The
Yeah, yeah,
symmetry.
yeah. Bina says, come on, don't show that. So that's why I clicked here. I remembered what Bina said. It's a bit confusing. Brilliant. If you were to wake up on a strange world, Biella asks her friends, with your memory gone, only able to remember one word, one concept, what would it be? Happiness, Aki immediately responded, always the impulsive one. Not so sure happiness would be best, Kaljun said. What if you woke up on one of those new reformed worlds? They're a serious bunch, that lot. You'd be in trouble pretty quick over there if you went around being happy all the time. His sober face matched his words. Yeah, Aki grumbled. They all laughed. The image of the irrepressible Aki in amongst the dour and gloomy new reformers was just too funny. Aki was very new and very young. The admission methods of the school, for the school, many and varied. In Aki's case, a physiological predisposition to nobleness, exceptionally rare, even more rare to pass the subsequent screenings. Most with this predisposition could not avoid developing a sense of entitlement or superiority, a peculiar contradiction. Put a pin in that, we'll come back to it. Biella, fierceness for me, said Marco. I know it appears odd at first, but hear me out. He glanced around the group, making sure he had their attention. Fierceness does not necessarily mean aggression, just as ruthlessness doesn't necessarily mean cruelty or meanness. I mean fierce as in energetic, determined, being ready for anything. He grinned his idea at them. The group thought this through. Seems good. You'd have the fierceness to protect you in case it wasn't a friendly world, someone at the back said. Yes, but a shy, tiny voice ventured. Biella had interacted with them many times, still unable to pronounce their name, not sure of their sex or even if gender was a consideration. She simply called them the community, as most others did. On my world, I am by far the fiercest of anyone. No jokes. With that, everyone laughed joyfully. The community joined in, as there was no meanness or belittlement in the laughter. The one who had spoken was by far the most placid entity, by far, any they had ever known. The idea of them as fierce was just too funny. No, truly, they insisted. I have a cousin who literally doesn't move for weeks, and he's no exception. Fierceness would make you too fast where I'm from. You'd go by everyone. They wouldn't be able to and wouldn't want to tune into you. This took this all took quite a while to come out, evidently an effort for the community. Nora spoke up next, a wild, clever girl with penetrating insights, full of surprises, a rocket ship of a girl. What about fluidity? She asked. A channel of concentration furrowed across her forehead. She was already debating herself. I was thinking of fitting in everywhere, but be wherever, be whatever. I was thinking of fitting in everywhere, be whatever everyone wanted. Too soon, Nora, too soon. Biella wanted more alternatives to be discussed first. The champion of appeasement, she exclaimed, putting an end to her own argument before anyone else. She'd already worked it through, high octane all the way. She'd noticed Biella's subtle change of intent. But someone started to say, appeasement, Nora asserted. Do I have to spell it out? She said with a great big grin. Her infectious, ever-present good humor made them laugh. Excellent. I am keen for more, to show the fullness. Biella smiled. The new nobility concepts, harmony, grace, love, appreciation, fearlessness, Nora interjected. Norma, I'm calling you Norma. You're in the story, Norma? Nora
Yes, he's
interjected.
coming with grin also.
Yes, exactly. Nora interjected. Maybe we'll call her Norma sometimes. All right. Nora interjected, having just thought of it. She knew it was on the wrong tack, but she wanted to stimulate the conversation to non-obvious concepts. She was a rocket ship of a girl, that Nora. Ambition, greed, desire, Carlton said with a twinkle in his eye. He beamed at Nora as if this had been all her idea, teasing her. She scowled back at him, startling him for a second, but then smiled broadly. Too quick for him. They like to tease each other, play around. Fearlessness was a good one, her mum deadpanned. More with ness at the end. Or perhaps he was serious. Ruthlessness? Biella asked. A pause as they considered, for they all well understood the necessity of ruthlessness when it came to doing good. It was the indispensable tool of good mothers everywhere, was it not? Calm, patience, discipline, forbearance, tolerance, a flurry of ideas swirled about them. Wait, Aki said. Go back one or two. Forbearance seems a good one. What's wrong with forbearance? Sweetness, lethality, eagerness, charm, Hermund said. At least a couple in there ending in this. Forbearance won't necessarily allow you to initiate, Nora said absently. Her mind had raced ahead. Fearlessness may make you too bold, which nixes boldness also. Ruthlessness lacks joy. Harmony lacks decisiveness. Calm, patience, and discipline all lack creativity. Nora was presenting the counter to the concepts mentioned, eliminating new ones all at the same time, wanting to facilitate the eventual resolution. She knew her friend Biella already had the answer all along. Just because you can predict something doesn't mean you'll be able to change it or be able to overcome it, she threw in for good measure, shifting orbit. Well, Biella, out with it, Nora demanded, straining forward eagerly, inadvertently and subconsciously brushing against the mump. No accounting for taste sometimes. Hermund beamed, forgetting the conversation. He wanted to blast off that rocket ship indeed. But Nora was oblivious to him. Well, she intended. Appropriateness, Biella breathed. Of course, yelled Nora. Appropriateness was, after all, the foundation of the new nobility. But the specific application, she trailed off, leaving the concept to be applied. They absorbed this, shaping it, each to their own, exploring it, testing it, looking for any flaws, all honest to a fault, wanting to make sure it was indeed the concept they had been looking for. They couldn't, in all honesty, ever simply accept someone's word for it, even Biella's. Well, it's appropriate, ends in this, hummed Babs' joke. One never knew with him. Yes, Nora exclaimed. To determine appropriateness, you'd first have to determine your goals, establish your context, or the other way around, depending on circumstance. The afterburn is kicking in now, as I am wanting context for the goal of appropriateness. Biella waited. It would bring wisdom, helpfulness, and charity properly into the picture. Nora raced on, sticking a bit on the word properly, playing with it in the context. Context is key, Biella said. That's the problem with all the other concepts, all limited in one context or another. Love seems such an obviously good one, Marco said. Yeah, love is awesome, Aki said. Why not love? Love without evolution is a dead end, Biella continued. Love without sentience can be calamitous. This is why she was Biella. Deep, magical, mystical Biella. They so loved her. Biella continued. If we are focused solely on love without furthering our awareness, we easily get stuck. And sadly, this often leads to inappropriate application of goodness. In this broad and endless universe of wonder, everything, every single thing, she overemphasized, everything, no matter how bad it may appear, Everything is appropriate at some time or another. You may find yourself literally having to fight someone's battle for them. Hate could temporarily come in handy to get the job done. They mull this over, finding instances where negativity of all kinds could be appropriate. A collective shudder rippled through the group. They didn't want to go there. It was enough to just lightly and quickly reach out along those paths. No need to dwell and make negativity a possibility, an actuality, or even risk the chance of doing so inadvertently. They were aware of the concept. The world you found yourself in was always a description. Appropriateness, they muttered and reiterated, each making it their own, applying it to themselves, to their particular situations, stretching and bending to test it every way they could think of. That is awesome. Appropriateness is always appropriate, her mum said, emphasizing the capitals. One really never knew with him. Appropriateness is not proper, as I have seen it confused, Galjun cautioned, glancing at Nora. It has nothing to do with that horror should. Each situation is different when it comes to appropriateness. There are no rules. Context doesn't only pertain to your surroundings, Biella added, but to time as well. We have to consider if our actions are appropriate in the immediate and in the long-term context. Biella paused. And in the universal context, she always had a kicker, that Biella, deep. It's no good making sure the material is taken care of while neglecting the spiritual. She carefully looked at her friends. But how often do we ask ourselves, is this good in the universal context? Biella leaned her slender frame into the emphasis. Are my actions appropriate in every single context I can think of? Physically, materially, socially, spiritually. He paused. Are my actions and my goals appropriate in the context of my death, my evolution, my awakening, my emergence, my actualization, my transcendence? Biella leaned back, her gaze far. Well, I see I'm going to have to rearrange my life, starting now. Hermumt muttered to a chorus of ayes. Where to start? Nora entreated. Action, application. Without application, it was all meaningless. Start with remembering appropriateness in every little action, in every microsecond, in every context, immediate to universal. Start by continuously remembering to be appropriate. Biella said this with such fierce determination, they simply nodded their assent. It was as if Biella were willing it right into them. That was Biella. Time for reflection, integration, incorporation. Biella stood, cueing transition. The group dispersed, agreeing to meet again, to discuss and share how they were implementing appropriateness in their lives, how it would apply to the school of nobility, how they would be incorporating those concepts into themselves, and so much more. Alight with enthusiasm and eagerness, they couldn't wait to resume the discussion. Thanks, Biella! Oh, and there we have the end. There we have the end. End of chapter 1. So tomorrow we'll group and get together, much like the group would do. That's why we have the weekly lives to get together. Yes. Love without evolution is a dead end. Yes, sadly. If we don't evolve our love into awareness, we can so easily fall into those traps of inappropriate applications of goodness. and while you guys make your comments and share, so please, brilliant, Michaela is here too. Wonderful, Michaela. I'm so pleased you could come. So pleased you could come. So while you share on the story, and I'm keen to hear how you felt the story is. Does it introduce, anything that you want to share? What came up in you? What's pertinent and relevant in you? But I want to make one quick little comment here, a little additional bonus story about love without awareness. So somebody I know, a very magical person, was out visiting an extended stay, I take it, at the grandfather's place, or at least the grandfather was part of the greater community. And at that time, magical person had a severe toothache. So grandfather, who's over 100, comes along and says, quite a sprightly grandfather, by the way. Grandfather comes and says, "Oh, I've got the remedy for you." Yeah. And he pulls out his toothbrush, which is nicely clean and everyone said, "Yeah, use this. This will solve your problem. This will ease the pain." Huh. Magical person stares in horror at grandfather, not knowing what to say, not wanting to be rude to grandfather. And so she runs away. Grandfather chases her with a toothbrush. "Come back. This is good for you. This is good for you. This will help. This is good for you." Eventually, magical person comes to her mama, who sees what's going on and says, "Yes, yes, grandfather. Yes, it will help. However, she is absolutely not going to use your toothbrush." Grandfather stares in amazement and dawning comprehension. Oh, oh, okay. I didn't think of that. All right. Inappropriate application of love. Yes, inappropriate application of goodness. Grandfather was desperately trying to help, but inappropriately so. This is too wonderful. Wonderful. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So brilliant. This is what I mean. Why love is a complication. Yes, it's a big topic. Big topic to me.
Yes.
This love, the loving. We're going to come back to love in a moment. I want to read Joseph's comment here. Words of importance to me first have to be considered in a certain number of words. I never pick one word. Too limiting. 3 words: grow, love, heal. Yes, this was the idea of this, Joseph, was not just one word, but one concept, hence the first concept. If we can come with a concept from which everything else flows, well, then we're there. And this was Biella's point, and what Nora said too. From appropriateness, because it's a concept rather than a word. It's more than just a word. Now, I use just one word because, I like this thing from that you see it in many of the old legends and scriptures, including the Bible. It's not limited to only the Bible, but in the beginning, there was the word. And the word moved across the face of the void, right? Or the waters, depending on where you want to say it. But typically it's the void. And so from this one concept, everything else flowed. So from appropriateness, you get growth, you get love, you get healing, you get that fierceness, you get the boldness, you get all of the concepts mentioned. In whatever circumstance you will find yourself, appropriateness is going to be your starting point, if we remember, right? And Ramsey says, "I got totally free now. I believe all actions and feelings, including love, need to be calculated and weighed." Exactly. Need to be calculated and weighed, thought through, considered, perspective shifted on, thought through to the end. And we can only determine if a particular concept, including love, including hate even, or any concept, we can only determine if it is appropriate, if it is valuable, if it is useful, if we consider appropriateness. Now, Biella did elaborate on appropriateness, right? Being both a consideration of context and your goal, motivation, or intent. Yes, because you could have a different intent to me, and that would change the appropriateness of your action, right? The example I use is if you have the intent to be a hooligan, to be disruptive, and you go to a wedding, well, then you're not going to laugh and be joyful, right? You're going to do the very opposite. See? So whereas if your intent is to go to a wedding and have fun and joy and celebrate, well, then your actions are going to be different. But for the hooligan, being disruptive and, being horrible, whatever, that's appropriate considering their goal. It's not appropriate for the wedding, but it's appropriate considering their goal to be a hooligan, you see? So appropriateness is very contextual, and it very much depends on the goal, the intent. That's why appropriateness has this marvelous flexibility and adaptability. And appropriateness forces us to be aware of our environment, to be aware of our goals, because that's where inappropriate application of goodness comes from, like grandpa, Yes, wonderful, magical, sprightly, 100-year-plus grandpa chasing magical person with a toothbrush, right? Inappropriate application of goodness. Didn't consider the full context, right? Grandpa was in a bit of a bubble. I mean, they were loving, they were really wanting to help the pain, right? Magical person remembers the incident. Right. So I may be having fun. I mean, the story as told to me, I was very true and accurate to this, but might add a little bit of histrionic emphasis there. But anyway, so yes, Ramsey, I believe all actions and feelings, including love, need to be calculated and weighed, and should never be blind and spontaneous unless they are based on very solid grounds, engraved in accumulated positive experiences. Precisely. Mindfulness, thoughtfulness, anticipation, greater awareness than our bubble awareness. The only way we can determine what to do, how to behave, is via considering what's appropriate. We tend to assume things are appropriate. Like grandpa, here's my toothbrush, use my toothbrush, but you got to use my toothbrush, right? Grandpa was quite insistent, yes, Peter, in his own caring, right? He was really pressing this, right? In that
Because
particular
he was
story incident.
completely not getting the idea that it is what this could be wrong in this. So he was just like, okay,
Exactly,
I'm happy. And
exactly, exactly,
so I was too
exactly,
young, so I was just running and trying to hide away from that
exactly, exactly,
without seeing
exactly.
anything.
Exactly. So when we understand appropriateness here is a conception, yes, like Joseph says, we don't want just one. This is the magic of this particular conception, is that it's a one that leads to everything, right? It's not just like you could say, well, positivity. Yeah, but positivity leaves out a lot of things because sometimes negativity is appropriate. Yes. It's not just a word which groups some words. It's not a concept which groups some concepts. No, appropriateness is a starting point that leads to everything. Right. I try to stay away from absolutes. And appropriateness is the exception because appropriateness is always appropriate. I think, as was it Nora or Hamum said, one of them, right? So this very, very, very powerful, very, very, very powerful.
So
Sure.
can we say that appropriateness is works like an energy which energize all other things whenever
Exactly,
it's needed? Okay.
exactly, exactly. Because appropriateness forces awareness in a good way. Right? You can't determine what's appropriate if you're not looking around you to say, well, what's my situation? And then well, what am I trying to do? See, and this mantra that we have is a daily usefulness, right? Going through our day. What am I doing? What am I doing? Capital D doing, not just in my physical actions while I'm writing a story. No, but what am I doing? Oh, I'm looking out for my evolution. I'm preparing to be in the best possible strategic manner, preparing for whatever may happen regarding my death. Those are all things I do every day. I'm also being patient. I'm being diligent. I'm being thoughtful. I'm doing perspective shifting. I'm thinking things through to the end. These are all doings, yes. But whenever I'm determining what to do in the context of appropriateness, I have to decide what it is that I'm doing. So I have to determine my goals, objectives, motivations, and
And pay attention
particularly
to
my
mindful
intents.
content. Okay. Uh,
Exactly, and intent, and intent. So
yes.
context and
Yes.
intent. We
Yes.
cannot have appropriateness without determining those two. So it forces us to not only be aware, but also to think and to consider. Yes, very important. Very important. Yeah,
Elizabeth
yeah.
has a question. She's
Yes, ma'am.
asking how to deal with others causing harm, believing they are being appropriate. How to have mutual context. Okay, I've just lost that. Okay. Mutual context regarding appropriateness.
Wonderful. I'm not seeing that that comment there. Is this
This
was
is
a
Elizabeth. And then she is
oh
asking
oh
how to deal with others
uh,
causing
uh,
harm, believing they are being appropriate.
yeah, yeah,
How to
yeah,
have mutual
yeah.
context regarding
Um,
appropriateness.
Elizabeth, as you do, this is a most wonderful, wonderful question. You are going into the very heart of the reason for this entire story. right? So I don't want to say, I really do want to get into answering these discussions as they come up. But what you are there digging into and opening up, Elizabeth, it is the entire story. So I can only say, because I really, really don't want to. I don't know why I'm not seeing that comment here now. Uh, I don't want to give your wonderful comment, short shift, right? Oh, it's higher up. Oh, it skipped over your comment for some reason. So Elizabeth, I can respond to it, but because it is such a huge, huge, huge question, and the answer is the entire story is the answer to this question. I'm going to not respond. Why? Because I want this to stay open. This question of how do we deal with others causing harm, believing they are being appropriate? In other words, how do we deal with bubbles? Yes, and how to have mutual context regarding appropriateness. This is the new nobility culture. How to have mutual context regarding appropriateness. The underlying concepts, the underlying philosophy, the underlying ideals that comprise the new nobility culture, the underlying behaviors that are, or what their behaviors are based on. This is exactly answering your question, right? And we are going to get to how to deal with others a bit later in the story, but it's part of all of this, right? So this please remember this, that how we deal with others and how we have mutual context regarding appropriateness. This is the entire culture of the new nobility. I call it Nobelia-Living. Yes, because Nobelia-Living represents the application of this culture, this philosophy, this understanding, because it has to be about the behavior, the application, the doing. It's not theoretical. This is why I wrote this story, to demonstrate all of this in action. Yes. So this is because if it's just a dry theoretical philosophical treatise, or whatever, it's like boring, right? It doesn't have the same impact. And also, when you read it as theory, you say, yeah, but I don't know how well this would work. Hopefully, we are going to see this in action. And when we see it in action applied, we are going to see this. Now, if we go back into the story a little bit, then we'll see that, like the laughter, right? Look how it was 2 or 3 times laughter came up, and it was particularly mentioned that it was a particular kind of laughter, right? That it was, because we take in the superiority paradigm, most take laughter to mean mockery, derision, denigration, things like that, right? You're putting somebody down when you laugh at them. You're making fun of them. It's inherent with the word laughter, not on Nobelia. Yes, their laughter is a celebration. It's joy. They're all joining together because, right? Look at the intent behind the laughter. It was just joy. It was just a celebration. The idea of the community being, fierce was very funny because they're a very solid creature. They look like a mobile anthill, by the way. I think it comes in later on. So just like this little cone thing, right? Because where they just basically stand in most of their lives, right? So this question is very, very, very powerful, very, very magical. Or two questions, right? So please, Elizabeth, make a note somewhere there. Even this appropriateness question mark context, right? Mutual context, and these are all really, really stick a pin in them, and how to deal with others that are in their bubbles, right? And we're going to come to that. Joseph says, native culture doesn't see one in a medicine way. 4 shows balance, a circle of knowledge, as opposed to white culture with 3 being the old sacred number. Bible is one, yes. First, there is the word, one understanding. No opposites. I'll take 3 or 4 or 7. So this is this idea of appropriateness as the one. It is capital O1, right, in which everything is enfolded into. Yes. So from the 1 comes the 3, the 4, the 7, whichever you prefer, because that is whatever is appropriate to you in your circumstance, right? So when you're in that particular culture, you choose the 4 or the medicine way or whatever it shows, right? It all depends on the circumstance, the context, and what you're trying to achieve. So 1 year in this idea of one concept, it is one concept as a starting point. It is to say, basically, like the one concept of the universe. We want to say, where can we start that will take us anywhere? Like you just mentioned, you're making a wonderful case. Yeah. Yeah. No worries, Paul. Paul just said he couldn't come. All right. So this idea is, like you say, Joseph, you're saying sometimes it's 3, sometimes it's 4, sometimes 7, whatever. But this concept of, again, not one word, but one concept. Yes. Yes. I know the chapter's called Just One Word because I wanted to start with this idea of the one word because in the beginning was the word. So it's tying into that. But really, when we go deeper, we say, it's more than a word. It's much more than a word. It's a concept, a conception. So as much as we conceive of the universe, well, nowadays, I guess with multiple universes, we have to say the cosmos. Well, at least when the word universe originally meant absolutely everything, well, then they said multiple universes. Poor choice of language there, but anyway. So the cosmos then is a one, right? And the all, I prefer to use all instead of cosmos and universe. The all implies a oneness that contains much many like that. Uh, right. So this is where this come from. And the idea is, yeah. Okay. Uh, uh, um, so the idea here too is, sorry, one last point I wanted to say onto that for Joseph. Joseph, it is about usefulness. Yes. Because this one concept gives us a starting point no matter where we find ourselves. As you mentioned here, in different cultures and different concepts are appropriate, right? And particularly in terms of number. So the idea is just to have a starting point. And this particular starting point allows us to go, like you say, to those different appropriatenesses for those different cultures. So very cool point there. Very cool point. Yeah, it's amazing how in different cultures, yeah, avoid them, narcissism 101. Yes, we'll get to that too. In the psychology of the superiority paradigm, those people who are real problems, called BMNs by us, right? They are like black holes, and we refer to them as black hole psychologies. Yes, and a black hole. Here's the problem with a black hole: you cannot love a black hole better. Whatever love energy or any positive energy, any good intent to make it better, any energy you give to the black hole only serves to make it a greater black hole. So why do you deal with a black hole? You don't give them any energy. You stay away from them. Yeah. As far as you can, right? Because any energy you give them makes them stronger. So this is now, if you starve a black hole, it eventually will implode because it needs that feed, because it starts feeding on itself if it can't get any outthings. And then it becomes a white hole and then it starts all fresh, right? So if you truly want to help a black hole, don't feed it. Yes, don't feed the trolls. That's very, very important. So that is one way. Now, of course, Elizabeth is going to say, yeah, but in the real world, I can't always avoid them. And yes, we can't. So this is where we're going to get to this just wonderful, detailed sophistication of the new nobility and how they deal with such things later on. Bina, you were saying something before I read Michaela's comment there. Lisa's here too. Wonderful. Hello, Lisa. Hello, Lisa.
Asking some, you're about to ask something to share, and then let's just
I just wanted to hear more from Sher now that appropriateness has come out. So, Sher?
Yeah, I'm here.
I just want to hear more from you. I just want to hear more from you.
Yeah,
That's all.
I was just waiting patiently. See, I was practicing my appropriateness.
Exactly, exactly. But I want to hear from you guys. I'm just jabbering on here, but please jump in and share. I want this to be all of us. Yeah, it's very powerful.
So here's my thoughts on this. I mean, appropriateness is good, and I understand it's contextual, but so is intent, and you can put the both of them together in my mind.
Exactly.
And
Exactly.
when I apply it to real world applications, not fantasy,
Exactly.
but when I'm applying
Exactly.
it to say my life, I have to ask myself, and maybe this is appropriateness, but I have to ask myself when I say, what's my intent? I ask, am I acting or doing or being from a place of, say, love or spite?
Exactly.
Or am I, doing something to heal, to help, to teach, to guide, or to serve the greater good? Is it based on my mood? Is it based on my energy in the moment? Am I being in the present moment? So I have to ask myself all these things, like throughout the day, like when you said, what am I doing? To me, that's checking my intent.
Exactly.
Because
Exactly.
many times, from my own experience, I may have the best of appropriate intentions and want
Yes.
something, like say for
Yes.
CJ, to work out really well.
Yes.
But what I want for him is not necessarily what's appropriate nor good for him.
Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
So,
Exactly.
I mean, but when we don't intend to, I believe anyways, the majority of us don't intend to harm others, but
Exactly.
our actions and our, well, lack of thinking, for lack of a better word, thinking it through, it can be harmful even to ourselves.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. So appropriateness, it causes this deep thoughtfulness to say, what in the situation relative to my intent is appropriate. Yes, my intent is to be good, but so was grandpa's intent. Yes. Now, I'm not saying grandpa change your intent and go chasing magical person with a toothbrush. Well, maybe your actions would change, but don't change your intent to goodness. Change your awareness to consider whether your actions are appropriate in the larger context. When grandpa was made aware, okay, maybe scratch his head with a toothbrush, right? I'm just imagining. See, so this is the magic of it.
I was going to say, in another, real world example, just to, I guess, drive my own point home to myself.
Yes.
You can see it in the evolution of my writing. And I'm going to pick on Norma for just a second. She pointed out something that was, I think, really important for me to pay attention to. She said, she had been reading, this was like last year, maybe a year and a half ago. She had been reading posts of mine, and she brought up a question. She's like, I see and I hear and I read and I appreciate your story, and I'm sure others have too. However, maybe if you start approaching it from a place of love, you might start to feel a shift. Now, those weren't her exact words, but that was her point.
Yeah.
And it came down to, who was I writing for? Was I writing for me? Was I writing for somebody else?
Yes.
So over time, things have started to shift, and it has been because of, number one, appropriateness, number two, intent. So as long as I maintain that I want my intent to always be appropriate, I'm not perfect. But it can usually pull my butt out of a fire.
Yes. So we could say that appropriateness is like the atom, and intent is the electron circling the proton, the nucleus of context, or the other way around, right? But I would probably say intent circles context. But exactly, they both orbit around each other. So when we look at appropriateness as this atom with these component parts, now when you start getting to a molecule, it gets a little bit more involved and more complex, like in Joseph's saying, right? The molecule is still appropriateness, but inside it, you've got the 4 concepts for balance from the native tradition, or you've got the 3 for Christianity, or the 7 from other traditions, right? Or whatever it is, but or not even a specific grouping or a numbering, but that's typically how our thinking goes. we start with a capstone, and then you get the first sort of layer of that pyramid of understanding. And then there's a
Right.
wider layer. And then right at the bottom, you've got all the detail. I mean, just go look at your at your hard drive, how your hard drive is organized, right? It's all this
No,
computer, and then you've got hard drive A, B, and then in that, you see, that's just how we have to organize things, because otherwise you're just going to have all detail and it will be a mess. So
it's
when
the
you
same
said,
thing though. I mean,
go
I
ahead,
think globally it's the same thing. If we look at it in that aspect, anyways, my mind, I look at it, every culture, every country, every culture, everyone, we all have a definition of what's appropriate and good to them. And I think that could absolutely apply to where your story is right now.
Yes, yes. I just want to rewind a little bit. Bina, did you catch what Cher said there, right? I got all excited when you said it. Now I have to paraphrase. I forget the exact words because it's been a while.
Sorry.
But you said, oh, well, just to elaborate a bit, to make my point clear to myself. Maybe didn't say clear, but to emphasize my point to myself. I love that. This was profound, right? That you say, I want to share a bit more because I want to make my point clear to myself.
Yes.
Fantastic show. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Very profound little comment there. Just kind of popped out, but just kind of came with things. It wasn't your specific, that wasn't the focus of your comment, but you were just providing context, but totally appropriate. And this is very important that we do this, and particularly in this community, this sharing. This is what we are doing. We elaborate in order to make things clear for us.
Yep.
In making it clear for ourselves, we tend to assist others also, because we give them options of understanding. Maybe it was clear for them, maybe not. Maybe they say, wow, I kind of thought I had it, but now that Cher says that and how it works for her, I never thought of that. That's like a whole other different path there that I never even considered. Oh, okay. Well, I mean, it was clear to me, but this is another way to get there. Other ways of thinking. Very valuable. Very, very valuable. Very valuable. So to go through the comments here again, in Ramsey responding to Elizabeth's comment about people in their bubbles, right? He says, I think for many, their mood swings determine their intent, while it should be the other way around. Yes. Now, Ramsey, at some point, we will digress into this as appropriate in the story. There's a little mini course that I made specifically on this topic. It's called Feeling and Believing. And this relationship between the two, it's kind of an infinity loop, which I call the lunacy loop, where those two mutually reinforce each other and can create an entire bubble of unawareness and a bubble of belief, a bubble of understanding and thinking things are, should, etc., and causes all sorts of trouble because of the one reinforcing the other. And vice versa. It's a very powerful thing. So we'll definitely be touching on that. It's a very big part of that. And we want to avoid this. So now we're touching on these big topics. As we go through the story, we are going to see the new nobility via Biella and the group applying these concepts. Now, maybe not all of them, but as appropriate where they come up, we'll do those digressions in the weekdays where we go into it in detail. Even if we have to go through that course, we will do so. It doesn't matter, because it is incredibly powerful. So the new nobility on a whole understand this connection between feeling and believing, this loop, and they make every effort to avoid it, right? So they don't want to fall into those traps, because once we know these tools, it's very, very, very powerful. So Lisa says, hello, Lisa. I'm so pleased to hear, Lisa. Wonderful, wonderful. Not easy to discern, capital D, discern, if someone else is being appropriate. Maybe not for us, but then that mutual appropriateness seems not easy to know. Yes, and this is where we are. This topic is the same topic that Elizabeth brought up. That how about mutual appropriateness, mutual awareness. And this goes into underlying assumption of intent. And we get back to that core conception of receptivity. Right now, receptivity in the way the new nobility are using it here is a very sophisticated mechanism which enables them to have this mutual appropriateness, right? And we're going to go through that as the story goes, and we're going to go into it in detail. It is very profound. So this receptivity, I want to elaborate on it right now, is the core of it. What makes me receptive to you? And thereby we can have this understanding of appropriateness, is that I insist, not assume, I insist, take for granted that your motivations are the best they could possibly be, right? So when I'm interacting with you, Lisa, Joseph, Ramsey, Norma, Elizabeth, all of you, right? Bina, Sher, Jessica, everybody, yes? I totally take it for granted that whatever you are saying, doing, thinking, feeling, whatever, your behavior, your deep intent, your motivation is motivated by your deep intent to goodness. That's totally a concept for a dictionary of power, right? So doesn't matter how you express what you're saying, doesn't matter how it comes out. I know what you not only mean, but also intend. Yes. So if I hear you say something, I'm like, wow, really? Really sure? Did you not like, really just say that? That sounds like a little bit weird or a little grumpy, a little aggressive, whatever. And you explain, no. I was trying to illustrate fierceness. My intent. Oh, okay. Yeah, I misunderstood. But you see, now I don't even think that, because I so insist that when I hear that, I say, well, sure must have a good reason for doing it. What could it possibly be? Now, you see the difference there, right? I'm not just being tolerant, but when I insist there's a good reason for the peculiar behavior, my brain starts to reverse engineer it. What could the possible good reasons be for this particular behavior, expression, etc.? And therefore, I now start reverse engineering to the appropriateness. Sure must be trying to make a subtle point here. Sure is trying to look at come at things from a roundabout angle. Or maybe Sure is saying something for herself. And this is how she needs to communicate to herself in this moment. Whatever. But I'm now not bothered by whatever it is. I'm not put out. And because I'm insisting on that deep intent to goodness. And also in this, I then do that reverse engineering, which allows me to create and understand and connect and really get to that the deep understanding of what's going on actually, rather than what I perceive. Because of course, also communication is a haphazard business. Yes. We got so much stuff going on in our heads inside, but to communicate it, this isn't always easy or even always possible. So we have to make allowance for that. And this receptivity, this assumption, this insistence, not even assumption, this insistence, this taking for granted that your intent to goodness is a core part of you. So how can I have any problems? Doesn't matter whatever you say or do. I know you are motivated by that deep intent to goodness. All of you. Yeah. So where's the issue? None whatsoever. Yeah. And this is Nobelia-Living. This absolute insistence that all who are there in that community, it's particular to this community, right? They know outside of the community, it's potentially a different thing. However, in the sophistication, as we'll see, regardless of whether they know someone has this deep intent to goodness or not, they will treat them as if they have it. Right? And this is a profound thing when you come to people in general, right? Because when you do, sometimes even people who've been in that bubble of behaving very negatively and horribly, when they get that opportunity to be more and to have that deep intent to goodness come out, and they grab it, they seize upon it, and they suddenly change their behavior, right? And they're on their best behavior, because this is a rare gift. It's a rare gift. So through this, this is part of their sophistication of being. They open up more options, more possibilities. And then, of course, when somebody's truly stuck in it and deep BMN, then they will use capital D diplomacy and other strategic measures. So we get there. Yeah. So let me scroll up a bit here. And it's very cool stuff. Very cool stuff. I love these comments. So yes, Ramsey says, I think appropriateness is so elastic depending on each situation. Precisely. That's the magic of appropriateness. That's why I capitalize it, right? It's capital A appropriateness, not just because little a appropriateness, if you go look it up in the dictionary, they will say proper in some, particular meanings for it. It's confused with proper. Proper has nothing to do with appropriateness. Proper is somebody deciding for their particular little bubble context, this is what's appropriate. And proper is that connotation with should and status and if you don't do it right, then there's something wrong with you, you're bad, etc. Right? So it's a superiority paradigm concept proper. Nothing to do with appropriateness, or at least very remotely, right? It's a distortion, it's an abuse of appropriateness. So yes, it's very, very elastic. The most important is to reach a positive, fruitful outcome for each action. Exactly. And simply deciding, simply determining, simply asking the question, is this appropriate? And what did Biella add to that? In all contexts. See, Grandpa with his chasing toothbrush did not ask that question. He only saw appropriateness in one limited bubble context. Yes, but if he had stopped or if Mama had said to him, "Hey, Grandpa, is this appropriate in all contexts?" I see what you mean. Yeah, I kind of forgot about that. Yeah. For all we know, Grandpa may have grown up in a household that was very poor, and they had to share the toothbrush. And to him, it was no big deal. That's just how he grew up. We don't know, right? So we have to also take that into consideration. So the more we are able to zoom out and see the bigger context, multiple context, and look at things from multiple perspectives, like now, just shifting on Grandpa's relation to the toothbrush, his reality and ours may not be the same, right? This is all part of this great capital G give that receptivity is. It's a give, yes? Very profound give. So the elasticity is part of why it is this one concept we can start from, right? It's the usefulness of it, yes. And yes, somebody said impeccability as the one concept. Appropriateness and impeccability, they are very closely associated. There are differences though, but they do. So appropriately impeccable and impeccably appropriate feel different. Exactly. And this nuance of language, this is exactly one of the powers of what we do. It's the power of way of impeccability, which is its other name is the language of conceptionality. Once we are able to really utilize conceptionality, we have a profound power on our hands, because to conceive is also to create. Yes. Look, we talk about the babies, conception. Yes. When a baby is conceived. But what about when an idea is conceived? Yes. Everything in our reality stems from a conception of some kind. So to be able to truly become wizards at conceptionality, at conceiving, we become wizards of creation. Yes. Very, very, very powerful. So yeah, to pay attention to those nuances and those discernments. This is why capital discernment is such a big deal. Because if you just appropriately impeccable and impeccably appropriate, same thing. No, it's not the same thing. They're very different. They are very, very different. There's a massive difference there. Joseph brings up a wonderful point here. Intent is not a thought. Correct. It is much more than just a thought or even a feeling, an object or a wish. Absolutely. Intent is what can make us succeed, or make someone succeed when his thoughts tell him he is defeated. Yes, exactly. So intent is an energy with a specificness to it. Not just a raw energy, it is power, in other words, right? Because you can have energy, but if you can't harness that energy, it's just energy. And this is precisely what power is. Power is harnessed, utilizable energy, much like intent. Yes, but intent is a very, very deep concept. It is one of those conceptions like consciousness, which become almost possible to define the more you go into detail. It's like when you start looking at the atom. Well, you think, well, okay, there's the electron, there's the nucleus, and you look at the nucleus. Oh, wait a second. The nucleus has component parts, and you go deeper and deeper, right? So some of these concepts have an infinity to them, but somehow, with intent, when we really start to think about it, we know what it means, rather than just having to rely on intellectual conceptualization. We know it deep inside ourselves, right? And we also, this is why I distinguish between intent and intention, right? Because intentions are wishes. I say, oh, well, they had all the best intentions in the world, but yeah, nothing happened. That's usually what we mean when we say, well, somebody had good intentions, right? Doesn't mean anything. They didn't act on those intentions. They were just ideas, wishes, right? But an intent, this is a commitment. This is an application of energy. So an intent is a very particular usage of energy, right? And Joseph goes on to say, it operates in spite of a warrior's indulgence. Intent is what makes him invulnerable. Intent is what sends a shaman through a wall, through space to infinity, Carlos Castaneda. Or at least to be more specific there, the quote is actually of Don Juan. Carlos didn't say that, Don Juan said that. Yes. Don Juan's detailed usage and understanding of impeccability is the one reason for reading Carlos's stories. You can ignore everything else. Just pay attention to what Don Juan says about impeccability. Yes, and they're very, very powerful. Now, when we think of impeccability as well, and on intent also. Sorry, I meant to say on what he says about intent and impeccability, but impeccability particularly. Now, if you're going to use intent because it is a power, we see the necessity for impeccability. So for me, intent and impeccability in that context are absolutely linked. You cannot separate them, because intent without impeccability, you lose its appropriateness, right? It can go where you don't want it to go. So impeccability is the mechanism by which we ensure that our intent is appropriate. So yeah, wonderful quote. Yes.
And Norma is asking about the determination and the intent. So she's saying that is intent
Yes.
more thoughtful than determination?
It is, Norma. It is. They very closely linked. We can say capital D determination is intent. Yes. It's very close to the same thing. Yes. That's why we have deliberate living as this concept. Way of impeccability is a toolbox for deliberate living. They very closely associated. So to be determined is to say, I am focused on an intent specifically. Yes, I'm going to make it happen. So yes, very much the same thing, Norma. You could substitute capital D determination for intent. But the difference between determination and intent, sorry, Norma, sorry, Abina,
I have a question.
Oh, please. Okay, I'm going to go in. There is a subtle difference between determination and intent. So I'll come back to it. Please go ahead.
Say, yeah, because where I'm seeing that, I saw her comment, and I was kind of wondering to myself, well, it's a good question, but for me, coming from from my perspective, I can have intent, and I can really would like to see something happen out of it. However, if I don't have the will or the motivation,
there we go.
To see that intent through, it's not going to happen. So all the determination in the world isn't going to matter.
Exactly. So the will and determination are very closely linked, and that's where the difference comes in. Where both will and determination are the local personal application of your focused energy, right? Your focused energy toward a particular goal. Yes. Now, however, with intent, we now connect and bring into the equation the universe, the greater energy. That's the difference. When I set an intent, this is a very big difference to me being determined. Me being determined is just me doing my thing. But when I set an intent, I'm putting my energy out into the universe to say, universe, please, I want some assistance here. I intended to make this happen. My intent expands way beyond just my locality and starts to connect to the universe. That's why.
Yes.
Frida asked this question, how do we set an intent? And we can go into that. Very, very cool
It is.
deliberation of those steps, right? But when we set an intent, we are engaging and enlisting the aid of the universe. And this is why when we do set an intent, two things. We need to make sure that we maintain that intent so that we have unbending intent, because otherwise you put it out there, but you're not fueling it, you're not keep giving it energy. And the reason why this is important is because you're involving the universe. Now think of the universe's timetable and the speed at which things universally move compared to you. Well, a lot slower, yes. In order to rearrange the whole world, which is essentially what has to happen for you to have your intent fall into place and everybody else's intent. So, right, the universe has got to arrange things that everybody gets what they want. This is quite a big job, right? Might take a bit of time. So we have to have that patience to wait and also to maintain that intent. Now, why is maintaining that intent so important? Because the universe might say, well, you had that intent for the Ferrari, but how long did that last? When you started to think of the insurance payments and getting scratched by the shopping carts at the supermarket, and the impracticality of the doors, you can't stop, those side doors that open up, you can't stop at the drive-through. You said, never mind the Ferrari, that's not going to work for me, it's too low, everyone's going to look down my dress anyway. So it's like, no, come on, this is no fun at all, right? So you see, you had that intent, but then you abandoned it. So the universe wants to know you are serious, you mean this intent. So it's going to hold off a little bit before it starts applying this, because it wants to see that you're maintaining, you're putting this, you're keeping your foot on the gas pedal, right? So this is very important with intent. So that's why intent is a little different to determination. Yes, of course, determination implies a continuity, but this involvement of the universe is the difference. Now they are related, of course. Now when you are when you have intent, you are also determined. But when you are determined, you don't necessarily have an intent. Yes. So they are very closely connected. Wonderful, wonderful point, Norma, as always. Wonderful, wonderful point, Norma. Very, very cool. So please keep going there with the comments and the questions. Please share, please share. This is too cool. I love this. Love this.
So Elizabeth is saying, environment is stronger than will. Intent creates more to connect and transform both.
Say that again. I was reading Anna Louise's comment there, which says, I listen for a while I wait for my daughter. I have decided to do only what I want today. Only joy. I love this. I love this. I love this. Now, sorry, Abina, hold your comment you read. Just hold it for me and repeat it in a second, because Anna is just bringing up a very profound point connected to intent. And to Elizabeth's greater point of community, and that greater point of assumption of intent to goodness, and the connectivity of all of this to impeccability. So, Anna, if you are being impeccable with your intent, and you are considering everything in the context of all contexts, could you possibly deliberately do anything negative, harmful, bad, wasteful, silly, foolish, etc.? No, you cannot. Therefore, when you truly consider if you are living impeccably, yes, if you truly consider, then under the context of impeccability, your wants, your desires will also be impeccable. Therefore, doing what you want, what you desire, is going to be appropriate. So always do precisely what it is like you feel like doing most, because that has the greatest energy, the greatest impetus, the greatest momentum to it, the greatest force behind it, the greatest intent behind it, right? Especially when you're passionate. This is very powerful, right? When you're passionate about something, you're putting out intent. But when you do this, and of course, impeccability is behind it all, which means that you've considered your intent in all of the context, right? You've thought it through to the end. You've perspective shifted on it, etc., etc. So in that context, how can what you want not be also appropriate?
Right.
It's a profound point. It's a very, very profound point.
You're doing what you feel is appropriate for you in that moment. A lot of times, I love going back to Is it helpful? Is it kind? Is it true?
Exactly. Exactly. Now, what I want to do, sometimes I want to do what's good for me, but not necessarily nice. But if I focus on the want part, I want what's good for me. So, okay, these don't taste wonderfully well, and I'm going to have to take them because I want the goodness. They aren't particularly necessarily nice, but, well, uh, uh, actually, these are very tasty gummies. I'm just practicing my hamming it up a little bit here. Most delicious. So in this case, good and nice is combined. So instead of eating sweets, I just get gummies now. They're different. I don't know. I don't even know what they all do. I don't particularly care, as long as they're good for me in some way. This is sea moss gummies. Very tasty. What sea moss does for me, I have no idea, but they're wonderful sweets. My point is about goodness, right? That sometimes we want that goodness, but it's not necessarily nice. In this case, the nice and goodness is combined. But when we're still doing what we want, and if we focus on that, it makes us much easier to do things. Very profound. Yeah.
And sometimes what we want to do is not going to be considered nice or necessary by others. But when
Exactly.
that way, I also think of, well, maybe they're coming from an aspect of should, that I
Exactly.
should or should not be doing X, Y, or Z. Well, no, I mean, if it's helpful to me, if it's kind to me, if it's going to help me out, benefit
Yeah.
me, then I'm just probably going to want
Yeah.
to do it.
Yeah, exactly. There's some more that I have. Pineapple flavor this time. Oh, too delicious. I have no idea what they do. It's a whole lot of stuff on here, Yeah, when I got it, it was lots of goodness for some reason. Instead of eating sweets, right? These are my sweets now. Really, I have a bunch of them. It's very cool. Anyway, fun. So yes, this point of what good isn't always nice is very profound. But I can take joy from the goodness when I shift my understanding of appropriateness, and it allows me to make that shift. And this changes everything. It's a very big shift, right? Very big shift. So I can take joy even when it's not nice. A very profound thing. Like an actor playing a villain or playing a depressed person. They get joy in playing that depressed person really, really well. And of course, they're going to be completely immersed in that character if they're a complete method actor. But are they truly depressed? Pretty close, but they keep that one part of saying, hey, my joy comes from doing this well. So they don't lose and they don't actually become depressed. Now, of course, some actors don't have that skill and things start to overlap a little bit and then they can. But still, there are others who have the skill of this discernment to understand the difference. Very powerful. Very powerful. So I love that you're here, Anna. I love that you're here. I hope you got to hear a bit of Biella and the interaction, right? Elizabeth. Sorry, Bina, I didn't forget about you. Go back to Bina. You were sharing something, Bina. Where'd you go? Bina?
No, I was just reading some comments, so you were
Oh,
responding
please,
to that. So yes.
please,
No,
please,
I just
please.
read that and you already respond to that. So
Oh,
that's okay.
oh.
Yes.
You too, sure. Please read them out for me. Help me with these here. To have aligned receptivity with others, agreement and honoring of ideal. Yes, exactly, Elizabeth. Beautifully expressed. Thank you. Joseph, more from Joseph. I'm so pleased to hear, Joseph. Man, brilliant. With your intent and self-discipline, you can move mountains. Yes, absolutely. And when we get into discipline, we have patience, discipline, forbearance, and those create timing. Right? It's very powerful. This also is something that Don Juan elaborated on, the Don Juan of aforementioned Don Juan about intent. But to really understand that, to go further, like Don Juan said, a warrior takes what he's been shown and takes it as far as he can go. Yes. So Don Juan is the first one to say, don't be quoting me, make it your own. Without making it your own, you're wasting your time. Yes, I might be paraphrasing Don Juan, but that's the point. He said, a warrior takes what he's been shown and takes it as far as he can go. Yeah? So this is what we're doing here. We are taking what we've been shown in all the various ways, right? And much of what Don Juan says, most of what Don says, or maybe even all, according to some, you can find in other cultures, in other philosophies, other religions, other ideologies, right? It's all out there somewhere, right? It's just kind of packaged very neatly together there. And this is, at least my history. I came to see all of that, and well, it's a long story. But when we think about stuff, we can reinvent the wheel, and this is no big deal. It's just be aware that if you really think things through, you are going to end up reinventing the world. I used to call impeccability when I was a child, when I was a youth, right, in my teens, before I came into contact with impeccability as this concept, as Don Juan says it, right? Not the religious connection to impeccability, but for me, I always called it rightness. Right? That was how it was for me, but not right or wrong as in a morality. Rightness, like capital R rightness, like that. That was what impeccability meant to me. So because rightness has baggage, I switched to using this term impeccability. I loved it. But when I heard that first being used in that context by Don Juan, so yeah, this is rightness. I was so excited. Everything that I'd been thinking about was so important to me. Yes, somebody else was saying it in a different way. So it was very cool. It was very cool. Intent is resilience. Yes, 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 yes. Or at least resilience is a big part of intent, right? Just to be that carefulness with our phrasing. Is intent more thoughtful than determination? Yes, it is more thoughtful. Yes, it is, because it's you are adding that extra thoughtfulness to connect that determination to the universe, to the greater scheme, to greater context, to having continuity, to maintaining it, etc. So intent is an energy application, a very specific energy application. Yes, very cool, very cool. Environment is stronger than will. Intent creates more to connect and transform both. So we could say with intent and will, that will is the local application of intent. Yes. And intent, we have our intents, and then there is the intent, or there's just intent itself, which exists out there in the universe. Yes. And as from my understanding of cosmology, my personal one, and others, we discussed this, and it's like, yeah, for me, when they talk about dark matter as being the bulk of the universe, is this a particular energy. Now, I don't know why they call it dark matter, because they can't really see it, but it's not dark as in negative, right? It's just unknown matter. And this, what they're calling dark matter, is not a good phrase, but for me, that dark matter is actually intent. And when you start to look at physics and you start to say, oh, if I consider, this is now huge, all caps intent, right? The intent that's beyond my intent, the intent of just everything. It's that dark matter. It's the glue that holds everything together. It's the core, it's the root. Our physical reality, which is, I don't know, 10, 15% of the universe, according to those calculations, somewhere in there, is just a part of the greater whole. It's just a particular coagulation, a particular representation, a particular description for our convenience of the greater intent, right? Much like time is not linear, really. It's multidimensional. But if you look this up, you can look this up. It's very cool representations. If you look up like 4D dimensionality, you'll see they represent it as this kind of a globe, like a light bulb cover, right? A lampshade, but it's got holes in it, and it's around the light on the inside, right? And then they'll show the Earth as the pattern that comes from the shadow pattern of this light. But the shadow pattern is three-dimensional, right? But if you take that globe and you lay it flat, you open it up, you get our 3D reality. Yes. But when you fold that 3D reality on itself into a globe, you get 4D reality. Now, inside that globe, of course, time is bouncing around within itself there, right? It's instantaneous. But that's kind of hard for us to comprehend and learn, because we're starting from low levels of awareness. So, we have to simplify it to get there. So we flatten it out and we make time linear, lot easier. Yeah. So this conceptionality, I'm bringing this in the context of conceptionality, right? And environment and all of this, intent and will. So Joseph said, intent is the base more so than appropriateness as I see it. Is my intent appropriate? Well, there you just answered your own question, Joseph. Why appropriateness is the core concept? Because you have to ask, is my intent appropriate? Yes. So we're starting with appropriateness to decide whether our intent is appropriate. See? So it doesn't matter, the end result is the same. You need to have them both go together. And not just intent, but all impeccability as well, right? Is my intent impeccable? Which is the same thing as saying, is it appropriate, right? But impeccability here, and the definition that we're using impeccability of, to go a little bit further than Don Juan, well, I think maybe he did say this actually, but intent is the best use of energy. Intent is giving everything due respect. Intent is being diligent, conscientious, scrupulous, right? And thorough. This is all impeccability. So when we apply this to my intent, have I been thorough in determining my intent's appropriateness? Have I been diligent? Have I been scrupulous? Have I been conscientious? Is my intent what is right according to me and my conscience, which has again come under the scrutiny of impeccability? Yeah, so they all work together, yes. But appropriateness is just the convenient starting place for getting to all of this, right? Because there might be situations where it's appropriate to not have a particularly strong intent, right? To just be kind of relaxed and chill and mellow, like in Anna's case, yeah? Yeah. So appropriateness, it is the overarching intent is a base, yes, but it's a base that comes via that, right? But again, it's these conceptions, they're all connected, and that's why we have the dictionary of power. You're putting all of these, appropriateness, intent, impeccability, joy, all of these, right? Putting them all into that dictionary of power, because they all connect. They all connect, right? And they don't connect linearly. They all connect to each other. So there's this great big sphere of interconnectedness, yes? So, but if you're starting in your day, right, and you say, well, what's my intent? If you don't consider whether your intent is appropriate, you can get into trouble really fast, right? So that's why appropriateness is so core, because like you say, is my intent appropriate? It absolutely doesn't matter. First, there is intent. Oh, are you saying it doesn't matter? The appropriateness of my intent is subjective. Yes, I understand this, Joseph, but the appropriateness absolutely does matter because it is subjective, no? Because I could have an intent that like the intent of Grandpa. His intent was to help magic child, right? But it was his intent may have been good in that sense, but the application of his intent was inappropriate, right? So if we don't consider whether our intents are appropriate, we can get ourselves into trouble or cause trouble, no? Joseph? I think we may be saying the same thing, but just in different language, right?
Okay,
Which is communication. Yeah.
Yes, you missed Ramsey's comment, I guess, and he says, well, you can have the will to change the environment. To give a small, simple example, if you have a will to plant a garden, you will have a great environment.
Yes, yes, yes. And what I mentioned earlier about the Elizabeth's comment about mutual appropriateness, yes. And this is let me just finish on Joseph. Joseph, sometimes people get stuck with this concept of appropriateness because it's too closely linked to proper for them. But when we unhook from proper and to say there is not an appropriateness, there's no such thing. There's no such thing. Appropriateness is always context and intent specific. Always. It cannot be, there's no central one thing that's appropriate. No. So when we're saying appropriateness as one concept, it's not saying this idea. No, it is saying the concept of appropriateness is the one concept, not the particular application of it, right? So that's why when I have an intent, like you say, is my intent appropriateness? You're asking this question. And you say it doesn't matter, but I'm not sure. At least to me, it matters very, very much. So I'm a bit curious. I'm keen for you to elaborate a bit more on that. So when we say that now we're at this mutual understanding, like with the point of Elizabeth, right, to answer Ramsey's comment as well, or to respond to it. that we understand and we take for granted. We insist on this intent to goodness, whether or not it's appropriately applied or not. But we insist on accepting that the intent of others is good, regardless of how they may apply it. The intent is good, right? And we know that intent can be subjective too. So, but we do insist, though, that your intent, however it's coming out, however it's being applied or expressed, the root intent is good. So we work backwards from there to reverse engineer to understand what's going on. So now we have this, as I explained. When I come into an environment of people who are basically just behaving according to the superiority paradigm because they've come to see this as appropriate, well, that's what you should do. And they don't know any other options. When we come and we insist on treating them as with the same receptivity to an intent to goodness, we can now use our will, our intent to change the environment by focusing on this bubble to say, hey, I am treating you in a way, or not even as if, I'm treating you according to your intent to goodness, to your moreness. And the person is like, wow, I'm getting a chance to be more. I don't have to be this knucklehead. I don't have to be superiority paradigm. I can be according to my deepest intent, according to my moreness. And now we change the environment, right? And just through that particular intent, that understanding. And this is the glue of the new nobility, is this is what they do, is they go further, they go deeper, they go more. They go more, they go more. So yeah, I'm very keen to hear, Joseph, because I want to understand how you think that that asking the question about the intent not being appropriate it doesn't matter, or maybe it was a typo and you meant to say it does matter. I'm not sure. Because yes, it's subjective, but that's why it matters, because it's so subjective. Yes, we want to try and make our subjective intent be more appropriate in much greater contexts. Yes, at least this is the intent of those in the story. Anna says, I just tap into what feels aligned in my heart. For me, that is my impeccability and nobleness. Yes, that is wonderful, Anna. Although I would say that, this, I would caution there, because our hearts can be misleading, like Grandpa's heart. That his heart said, just do what's appropriate, and he was chasing Magic Child around with a toothbrush. So yeah, this will help for the toothache, right? It didn't consider the greater context. So we have to be very careful of our hearts, because our hearts can be in bubbles. Like Grandpa's heart was in a good place, but he was in a bubble. Yeah.
Yes. So Joseph is saying that conflating dark matter with intent, deep, it never occurred to me before.
Yeah. I love that, Joseph. It's so powerful to me. It makes sense of everything. It's like all of a sudden, it's like, well, duh. I know. I love this. I love this. It was, when I was reading about dark matter, I said, what could it be? What could it be? And I was practicing perspective shifting on it. And it just came. It was like, well, okay, well, duh. I love this. I love that it connects with you, Joseph. See, I just love this. I just love
And
this.
I was saying, if we do no harm, take no nonsense, and keep creating with that intent, all is well.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. And part of our impeccability, part of this noble intent, is to understand we don't have an obligation to be good, but we do have an obligation to not be bad or to not be negative. Absolutely.
Yes, and also
Absolutely.
she's saying that still you don't know my
Yeah.
heart.
Yeah. Well, I understand this, Anna. I feel I do know your heart, which is why I very much wanted you to be here, right? I'm making the case, though, just on your comment, not personally to you necessarily, Anna, but just that we want to have that caution, because like Grandpa in that wonderful story, Grandpa's heart was in the good place. So yes, so for me, it's just like I know my heart is in the right place, but I also want to check that I don't inadvertently fall into a bubble. That checking is what makes the difference, right? Because sometimes I do get in myself into trouble or cause trouble because my heart was in the right place, but I wasn't in a big enough bubble. I was in a small bubble, like Grandpa, right? So I know from experience that even though I don't intend to do harm, like Grandpa wasn't intending to cause harm. Okay, he didn't cause harm specifically, but he was being inappropriate. So Elizabeth, when it comes to countries, yes. Now I'll elaborate this on a bit more. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Nina.
because you missed some of Ramzi's comments.
Oh,
So
oh,
Ramzi made a comment about these countries that they are not
yeah,
going to
yeah.
willingly participate in the
Yeah,
environment and all
yeah,
this.
yeah. I'll respond to that in a minute. I just want to say Anna's going. Bye bye, Anna. So glad you're here.
Okay.
So my point, Anna, is there's more, capital M, more, right? We tend to assume what we know sometimes is like all of it, but there's more to it. And when you think a little bit deeper about things, it's like, yeah, I didn't think of that. And that moreness, that's what we're exploring here. And it's very profound. It's very powerful and very, very important so that we don't end up being inappropriately good. Yes. So Ramsey said
Yes.
what? Say again.
Yeah, I was just scrolling through that. So let me get that
Okay.
because Ramzi made a comment which
All right. Let me respond to
that was
Joseph
it
in the
funny.
meantime.
Okay, no, I can read now. Okay.
Oh, go ahead. Go
Well,
ahead. Go ahead. Go ahead.
you can have the will to change the environment. To give a small, simple example, if you have a will to plant a garden, you will have a great environment. Okay. After that, he made a comment which I'm missing still. So, yeah, I don't know where it goes. It's just anyway. Let
Yeah.
me
Yeah.
certainly.
Yeah. So both for Elizabeth and Ramsey and everybody else, and Elizabeth, this point of countries, yes. Let's take this in the big picture and understand. So what we are looking to do here is apply moreness, this understanding, this philosophy of impeccability, this understanding of going even beyond the impeccability to nobleness, which is bonus goodness. Not it's not necessary, it's bonus. So we're going above and beyond. So these cultures, these ideals, these philosophies, these ways of being, these tools of living, right? They are, yes, they are ideals, but they are practically attainable ideals, right? As we see, Elizabeth, we see the difference in our lives that you've been attending, right? And in Zoom and before when we came, right? This environment that we are in now, this environment of communion and particularly of collaboration, of sharing, right? Not telling, but sharing. We are changing the paradigm of behavior. Now, in order for countries to do this, you would need sufficient members of each country to be operating on this paradigm, and then the problem solves. Within the superiority paradigm, the only way they can solve it is through conflict, right? And battle and competition and winning and all that nonsense. So we are the way we are going to be dealing with the country issue is to say we've got to first change the paradigm. Without changing the paradigm, you're wasting your time. Yes. So the greater appropriateness says that there's no solution within that because the paradigm is limited. I call it a no possibility of win paradigm, right? If you take it to its ultimate, it ends up self-destructing. It's a no possibility of win. So when we just throw out this whole concept of winning and we have these type of conceptions that we're bringing in here now we're in a position on a country to country basis. If there was that capital R receptivity, there wouldn't be conflict in the first place. Yeah. Because you would be dealing with people whose intent to goodness is paramount. And I might say, well, look, Bina, I love your idea here. I love the idea that you want to come and use this part of my country because it's going to really enhance your thing. But are you considering in this context, in that context? And then Bina might say, well, I didn't think of that in the bigger context. All right. See, and then we'd have discussion. We'd have perspective shifting. We'd think it through to the end. We'd come to resolution. When you think things through to the end, your personal opinions fall away because things have their own logic, their own rationality, their own understanding, right? And all your personal subjectivity and bias starts to fall away when you think things through to the end. It's an incredible thing. Now, you might still be subjective because, well, it's just an end as far as we see it. But so often when you really get to the end, you say, I get it now, I see. And it all falls into place and all my subjectivity falls away. And this is a magical
Yes.
thing of thinking things through to the end. I want to
Okay,
read
with
Joseph's
this,
comment real quick. Go ahead. Go,
yes,
go.
yes. Joseph's
Go.
comment, like
Yeah,
the
yeah.
appropriateness of our intent is variable. We are all in various stages of development or personal growth. Our intent is positively related to our level of growth. The higher our stage, the more appropriate our intent will ultimately be.
Exactly.
bearing a pathology of each level. Yes, okay.
Yes, yes. Wonderful, 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 Joseph. Exactly, exactly, Joseph. That's very, very, very barring a pathology of each level. That's that's a very fun way of saying it. But yes, this is precisely the point, right? That and this story is about remember, right? Remember the story, the context. Why I started with the quotes from the prologue, right?
Mhm.
Where we are saying this story is the story of our descendants, but not just our regular descendants. No, those particular descendants that we sent out into seeding this new galaxy as the absolute very best of ourselves. So when you are talking about those levels and the pathologies, this environment, Biella, the group, the new nobles, they are our descendants representing the very best of what we might be. So yes, it's idealistic, but also hopefully realistic, or at least plausible. So we
Mhm.
are now looking at this application of intent, of will and free will and choice and everything that goes with it, right? In
Yes.
this context of a society, to get back to Joseph's comment there, where did it go? I'm getting behind here. I love this. Right.
Yes.
The appropriateness of our intent is a variable, but we are looking at intent that where this on Nobelia, they have made extreme effort to apply their intent as sophisticatedly, as thought through to the end as possible. Right? The entire culture is built around this. Yes. So this is a very magical thing. So we are looking at this where our appropriateness is in the biggest context that could be imagined, right? And Nobelia is a particular context that is free from pathology. Yes, or at least the pathologies of the superiority paradigm, right? So this is why it is so special. This is why
Okay,
it
so
is so
Lisa is
special.
saying that yes, and putting the focus on appropriateness, in my opinion, can affect the intent in the moment.
Exactly, exactly, exactly,
And Elizabeth
exactly.
says that at least plausible is enough for me.
Yes, exactly, exactly, Elizabeth. Exactly, exactly, Elizabeth. At least plausible is enough. That is the intent here. It's not to say, hey, everybody, you got to come and live in Nobelia, you got to follow that. No, because remember, it's bonus, right? It's bonus. It's a choice.
Yes.
This is just an example. And that superiority paradigm thinking that says when somebody shares their idea, they believe everybody else must follow it, because that's how superiority paradigm thinking thinks. But it's not Moreness psychology. It's not Moreness intent. No, my intent is not to say this particular example is one that you must follow. Absolutely not. It's an example which is simply there to show that something else is plausible. The plausibility is the point. The
Yes.
plausibility is the point. Not that this is something that you need to follow, adhere to. No, no. Just that, well, if there's one plausible alternative to the superiority paradigm, wait a second, I can go and create my own plausible paradigm. Yes. And
Yes.
together we might have this collaboration to create one. So it is simply an example. I'm going to say that a lot, right? Like without
Yes.
application, it's all meaning. The story is an example, not the example. No, and. So yes, Elizabeth,
Sure.
blind spots
Yes.
exist everywhere. And when it comes to our hearts, we have to be attentive to this. Go ahead, Bina. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Yes. Sure also made a comment, and she says that we can have an intent to goodness, but not be quite aware of that intent. This had to
Exactly.
be pointed out deliberately to me early in my journey. I don't apply levels, though. Okay, though awareness and intent are what I listen for. Okay, but
Yeah.
sometimes it's just limitations of language
Yeah.
that we want to define that, okay, where we are. Yeah, we can say that dimension. I understand the intent, at least from Joseph's point of view, what he was saying, that
Yes.
level. Sometimes it's just a lack of our vocabulary, or sometimes not vocabulary, but the
Yes.
limit. of language. Which
Exactly.
we
We
push us
speak
to say.
different
Yeah.
languages. We speak
Yes.
different languages. We don't speak
But
the
the
same
intent we
language.
can understand.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah. And
Universally.
and and particularly in Joseph's case, and Joseph is very culturally immersed in his particular culture, right? I mean, this is not my statement. This is Joseph saying this, right? Um,
Okay.
and so when we have that deep immersion into culture, and we are speaking cross-culturally, like with you and I, Bina, right? Very often that, when I when I said yesterday that you were what was the word I used? Um, mangling or something, and he said, "Wow, for me that's a very strong harsh term, right?" Uh,
Yes.
yeah. So when we oh,
Mutilating something.
mutilating. I was saying you were mutilating the poem or something. Yeah, that's right. You were reading your own poem, and I was saying you were mutilating your own poem, right? That beautiful
Yes.
poem that you wrote, that truly
Yes.
world-class poem that you wrote, well, in my opinion. Yeah.
Yes.
Anyway, so when we are dealing with cross-cultural, this is very important to understand the haphazardness of communication. Now, I want to make a very further, deep, sophisticated point here, right? That to me, every single individual is a culture of one. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. You
Yes.
look at that petri dish and you say, "Oh, I've got the culture going," right? Different kind of culture. Yeah. But inside that dish, there could be that one little bacteria in there that's its own little bubble, right? And it's doing a different
Yes.
thing. And this is how penicillin was discovered, right? And then it started to multiply. Okay. So my point is that, when we consider that we are all cultures of one, it's very, very powerful. So, with communication, we just have to keep going. Sometimes, we think we're saying the opposite, but we're actually saying the same. All it is just contextual understanding, use of language, and use of context as well, right? What one means with a word or a concept is not necessarily what another means. So this is why in Way of Impeccability, we have the repeat backs in order to make
Yes.
this. Why we have the Dictionary of Power, so that
Let's.
in the
Yes.
sorry, I just want to say in the Dictionary of Power, we actually make sure that we are speaking the same language, right? Or close to it.
Yes.
Go
Okay.
ahead.
Elizabeth is saying that possible is like sailing into the wind, which is yes.
Exactly. Who said that?
Elizabeth.
Oh, Elizabeth. Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. Sailing directly into the wind, just to amend that, because, sailors will tell you, "Well, I sail into the wind," when you sail 45 degrees, they call it sailing into the wind, but not directly into the wind. Yes,
Yes.
I love that, Elizabeth, that you brought this up. And that
Yes.
is an impossibility that is possible. And it just gives me so much joy, so much joy. It's just
Yes.
so magical. It's so
And
magical.
Ramsey said that I impossible is I am possible. Of course. Yes. Yes.
Exactly. We must never forget that. Yes, it's a very, very cliched internet meme, but it's one of the few ones that I absolutely enjoy. I
Yes.
am possible. And when we
Yes.
understand I to not be the simple thing, I is more than one. I is a wonderfully complex term. Boy, it becomes very fantastic.
Cher saying that, okay, I understand the difference in language and culture. I offered the expression of my experience with intent. Thank you, Veena. Sure.
Yeah,
By any means, I was not just saying that, okay, you or anyone, of course, not
yeah,
understand.
yeah,
I was just making the obvious really obvious
yeah,
and
yeah,
practicing
yeah,
my own
yeah,
expression.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it was not an intent
yeah,
to try to say something like that. It was
yeah.
a comment, and I was just explaining it.
I love it. I love it. I love it. Joseph says something important here. For example, some people can understand the following statement, some can't. It gives an indication of your level. Now, I try to avoid levels, but all right, we can't avoid it entirely. But yes, it's all about awareness and comprehension. It's not better or worse, it just is, right? Uh,
Mhm.
I'm ignorant compared to the universe. Relative to you, I may be more or less ignorant, but you know what? The difference between the two of us compared to the difference to the universe is so minuscule, it doesn't matter, right? So he says the hurt of one is the hurt of all. The pain of one is the hurt of all. Yes, absolutely, Joseph. So part of receptivity is, and why receptivity is so important, is because this is really huge. This is a big, big, big point here, right? In this terms of understanding. Now, when you say that some can and some can't understand, unfortunately, what inhibits understanding so often is that we come into contact with that which is outside of our comprehension and relative to our imaginations and what we are familiar with. So for the most part, when we see something new, it's not really actually truly new, as in, capital N new, but it's rather a variation of what is familiar. But when something comes along that's truly new and different, sometimes we cannot even see it, literally cannot see it, because our brains cannot conceive of it. Yes. So now, when we take this understanding and we apply it to capital R receptivity, I say, wait a second, somebody says something and it doesn't make sense to me. Well, wait a second, let me first rewind that. It doesn't make sense to me. Let me take that out of the equation. Let me say rather, I am going to insist it does make sense, but I don't see how yet. See the difference? When I'm regarding your statement in the context, in the framework, in this greater perceptional framework, context of perception framework of not making sense, I'm going to automatically, the brain, the way it works, emphasis, connectivity, I'm looking for why it doesn't make sense. But now I'm focused on disproving your statement. But what if what you said is something like, it is possible to sail directly into the wind? Now, your conventional, traditional sailor says, nah, that doesn't make sense. It's just nonsense. And they find reasons why. And they cannot hear what I am saying. Yeah.
Okay, so
Right.
we are already crossed
So,
to
right.
our
I
one.
just want to finish this point. Sorry, Bina, a big point.
Yes.
But I'm saying when we have this capital R receptivity, and I say, well, I'm going to treat what you say as making sense, even though I absolutely cannot see how. Then I do that reverse engineering. Yeah. So, so that reverse engineering now creates a huge difference, because this allows me to come to that like the sailor. When I first encountered that, I saw, luckily by then I'd understood receptivity, and I said, wow, how I want to know how you did this. I accepted it as possible, right? Even though I knew in the depths of my being, having been a deep sailor, and really understanding, say, I knew in the depths of my being that this was impossible, but yet I was open to this, right? Because I took that receptivity and I said, how? And then it was like, this is a very simple thing. Yes. I mean, once you have that receptivity, it's very, very simple how it works. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's like, oh, why didn't I think of that? Yeah. Why didn't I think of that? Because you hear this all the time with inventions, because of a lack of receptivity. Because you had that mindset of, well, why doesn't this work? And you looked for reasons why it couldn't, rather than, why does this work? And let me find the reasons. Yes, reverse engineering. Reverse engineering.
Yes. We
Very
have
big deal.
other comments,
Yeah.
but just want to add something in the receptivity. It is exactly, the process is like just how we appreciate art, especially abstract art, because nothing is obvious. We see that and we insist on it does make sense. It has some value, it has a message, it has a feeling, it has that particular energy. And this is how we appreciate art. So we can apply that same appreciation for other
Yeah.
people's perspective and their stories and their ideas and
Yeah.
everything. And of course, our own stories also. Sometimes it doesn't make any sense in the beginning to us. We struggle big time when we try to articulate some new idea, new awareness, new
Yeah.
concept,
Yeah.
and it becomes like, oh my god, so I'm struggling, I'm mumbling, I'm just going here and there, and it doesn't make any sense, at least to
Yeah.
other people. But
Correct.
later on,
Correct.
as we
Correct.
practice more, we get more
Correct.
clarity. So
Correct.
this receptivity is exactly like appreciating art, especially abstract art.
So it says, comments in text boxes can be like talking into the wind. Love you for
Yes.
understanding. I love it. Now, in this context, Norma, I'm sorry, sure. Yes, sorry, Norma. Norma's saying I have to say goodbye now. Bye bye, Norma. Bye bye, Norma. Now
Yes,
we'll
we also
contact
need
more
to
later.
say,
So
we also need to
yes,
say that. Yes.
we'll get there. We'll get there. So in our case here, yes, initially the wind may disperse them, but we are going to come back to all those comments, and we do reply to them. Beautiful thoroughness feels like movement.
Yes.
Takes commitment and commitment to trust of self to see another. Yes, Elizabeth. Yes, yes, yes. And when we start to utilize these deeper conceptionalities that are typically outside of our conventional conceptionality, right? And that's the point here. This is the point. That's why I keep emphasizing this capital R, receptivity. Yes, that we want to have this openness to ideas which are outside of us, and to treat them as plausible as possible, and to go even further than that, to insist they make sense, and then reverse engineer. How are you going to figure out alien technology if you don't have this understanding, this insistence that the technology makes sense? Yeah, and you won't be able to.
Yes.
I mean, you look at it, you say, what's going on here? Like, wow, right? Well, okay. No, I'm not saying there is alien technology, but just to make a point. Bye-bye, Norma. Bye-bye, Norma. We'll connect with you more later.
Yes.
All right, so
And
that's a good point to also for us to leave and end on. Thank you for that
yes.
cueing there. So I love this. I love this. And you see why I wanted you to come, Joseph? Ah, man, I so love it. I just love it, and I'm really pleased. And we are here just for everybody who is Sundays at 8 o'clock Pacific Standard Time, 8 in the morning Pacific Standard Time. In the weekdays, it's a little later, right? So Monday through Friday, where we're going to do this again tomorrow, but we're going to go into it in even more detail, right? So we take one point and run with it. Now we went through all the comments, right? But we'll try and go by each point and really go into it and have like, instead of just me and Bina commenting, you guys commenting on the others' comments, and we really go into it in depth, right? Because it's wonderful. And then we get the personal stuff coming into it and all this. So Janet, I didn't hear anything from you, Janet. I'm keen to hear what you think, Janet. I'm keen to hear what you think. But maybe tomorrow, maybe Janet won't be able to come tomorrow. I'm very keen to hear from you, Janet. Very, very keen.
Okay.
So a pleasure, Janet. Absolutely a pleasure. Absolutely a pleasure. Absolutely a pleasure, Elizabeth. And it's such a joy being here.
Yes.
Such a joy hearing all your thoughts, your understandings, your comments. And as we go, we are going to work on the tools, the techniques, the methodologies of sharing, right? I mean, that's all part of Way-Of-Impeccability, but for those who haven't done it, right? We are going to
Yes.
emphasize this so that we can have the tools to facilitate the maximum value, the maximum moreness, the maximum sharing, the maximum communion, the maximum collaboration in this environment. How to communicate is going to be a big theme, going to be a very big theme. Yeah. Bina?
Yes, yes. So thank you so much, everyone. Ramsey, Joseph,
Absolutely.
Anna, Jessica,
Absolutely.
Cher, Elizabeth, Janet, and if I'm missing someone, anyway. So
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
so profound, and I just
Jessica,
so enjoyed
Jessica,
this.
Jessica was here
Yes,
and dropped off. So
yes, yes. So thank you so much, everyone, and
yes.
hope to see you guys tomorrow.
Yes, absolutely. All right.
Bye for
Bye-bye,
now.
everybody. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. Ah, so lovely.